Hi there. Today's topic in A Course in Miracles Applied is forgiveness is looking with Jesus. Forgiveness means looking with Jesus. It says in the Course that we cannot forgive on our own, and we should not attempt to forgive on our own. We should always look at the ego, whether it's inside or outside, with Jesus next to us, or the Holy Spirit. There's a very clear definition of forgiveness in the workbook. After the reviews, after part 1, it's basically the first page on part 2, in part 2, which is page 401, what is forgiveness? And it's a very powerful 5 paragraphs. We're not going to go through all of it. We're just going to go through 2 sentences for this particular segment. And it's in paragraph 4. Forgiveness, on the other hand, is still and quietly does nothing. It merely looks and waits and judges not. So forgiveness is not something active. Something active can come out of it, but the actual forgiveness, as the Course says, is looking and waiting and not judging. That doesn't mean we don't judge the other person. If we wouldn't judge the other person or ourselves, we wouldn't need forgiveness. It is we don't judge our unforgiveness. That is forgiveness. The Course always goes back to the introduction, where it says to remove the blocks of the awareness of love's presence within us. So we're looking at the blocks with Jesus next to us, or with the Holy Spirit next to us. And there are a lot of sections in the Course that specifically talk about this. A couple of good sections are chapter 11, chapter 12. There's a lot of that in those 2 chapters. We're going to go through a couple of those. We said in the last segment, saying no to Jesus, that we really have to look at the hatred in us in order to go through it and past it to the love that is behind it. Jesus lays out in the Course, on one level, both sides, right? And he says that in the text, page 194, paragraph 4. I'm going to give you the section and all that in a second. 194.4. That is chapter 11. Introduction of chapter 11, God or the Ego, in paragraph 4. And he says there, when you have at last looked at the ego's foundation without shrinking, you will also have looked upon ours. And ours, he means the right mind, his thought system that he offers us instead of the ego. Right? So we're in the Course process over the years. We basically do both. We look at the ego's darkness, and we also establish a relationship with Jesus or the Holy Spirit. So that he says we can't really look at the deepest, darkest aspect of the ego without already being sure that, or mostly sure that, guilt is really not real. Guilt is an illusion. As long as we still are heavily invested in our belief in guilt, we cannot look at the ego without absolute terror. So that's why he says when you finally or at last look at the ego's foundation without shrinking, you will also have looked upon ours. So there's a balance in the Course between those beautiful, lovely passages that lift you up and tell you basically how easy it is to reach God, how easy it is to take the last step and leap into his arms, to love your brother, all that. But on the other hand, he also tells us how hard it is, how looking at the ego is not something we should underestimate. Like Helen said one day, never underestimate the power of the ego, or of denial. So we have to do both in the course. We can't just concentrate on the nice passages, and we can't just concentrate on the darkness. That makes no sense either. That's why we have both. The workbook is basically there to make sure we know we have a right mind. That's basically the purpose of the workbook, to show us that we have a right mind and start the mind training process, that we have a choice from the ego always to come over to the right mind, to Jesus. So I want to look at a couple of those sections that describe really clearly what forgiveness is, which is looking with Jesus at our ego. There's one on page 176. Paragraph 6, which is in chapter 9, section 7, the two evaluations. And he basically says, you cannot evaluate an insane belief system from within it. So when we're inside the ego, when we're in the ego, we cannot evaluate it. It's like a student cannot evaluate her process or where she is in the curriculum, her knowledge. She has to step out, go to the teacher, and ask the teacher what the broader theme is. How is she or he doing within the broader scheme of things? We cannot evaluate our progress. That's what Jesus says there too. But we cannot evaluate an insane belief system from within. We have to step out of the ego, and there's a certain sequence to stepping out of the ego and looking at it. Its range, the belief system, precludes it. You can only go beyond it, look back from a point where sanity exists and see the contrast. Only by this contrast can insanity be judged as insane. So the process is to go to our day every day, as much as possible, be aware of our thoughts and what we think of other people mostly, and see our guilt in either them or ourselves, and look at this, go beyond it, and look back from a point of sanity. So ask Jesus for help and look at the ego. The moment we look at the ego, we cannot be inside the ego. So looking at the ego makes us step back, and the part that looks at the ego cannot be the ego. And forgiveness is still and quietly does nothing. It merely looks and waits and judges not. Right? We look and we wait. The judge not comes from Jesus, not from us. Page 202 is a good one. They're all good, but that is particularly good. That is also in chapter 11, and that is section 5, the dynamics of the ego. And there are two paragraphs that are basically all about that. And the dynamics of the ego is in quotation marks, because he explains that right now. No one can escape from illusions unless he looks at them. For not looking is the way they are protected. So if we don't look at the ego, if we judge somebody, we realize we judge somebody, and we try immediately to go past it to the love that is there, it's not going to work. It works maybe a couple of times, but when we go deeper into the ego, into the more darker places, this will not work at all. And it's better to train ourselves to always do the same thing. Look at it, ask for help, and don't do anything else, right? Otherwise, we try to somehow solve it our own, which is impossible. We cannot forgive on our own. No one can escape from illusions unless he looks at them, for not looking is the way they are protected. There's no need to shrink from illusions, for they cannot be dangerous. We are ready to look more closely at the ego's thought system, because together we have the lamp that will dispel it. Main word here is together. We cannot dispel the ego because we are 100% fused to the ego, right? When we separate from God, along sequence down to the bottom of the ladder, where we are in this world, we are fused with the ego, and we have no clue what the Holy Spirit is, or Jesus is, or what the right mind is. We have no idea. The ego tells us, the ego has certain experiences for us that tell us, oh, this is the right mind. We should be very wary of those. The ego is very sneaky. It wants to keep us there. So it's better for a student to go to the baseline and say, you know what, I'm probably in my ego and not with the Holy Spirit. That's the more likely scenario in any kind of situation. We are ready to look more closely at the ego's thought system because together we have the lamp that will dispel it. And since you realize you do not want it, you must be ready. Let us be very calm in doing this, for we are merely looking honestly for truth. Looking. The dynamics of the ego will be our lesson for a while, for we must look first at this to see beyond it. We cannot see beyond the ego first. In another section he says, the ego always speaks first. Is wrong, but always speaks first. So we have a reaction to somebody else or an occurrence, and the first reaction is from the ego, and then we try to be spiritual and go straight beyond it and look to the love that is there. It doesn't work. It works a couple of times, as I said. It does not work as a process over 30 years. It does not work. We have to look at first, we don't skip a step. We have to first step back and look at what we're doing. Oh, this is what I'm doing. I'm judging this person because whatever it is. We don't go straight to trying to love that other person. Oh, it's a brother and we're united, we're one. We don't believe that, because if we would believe it, we wouldn't judge them in the first place. So when we realize we judge somebody, we step back and ask Jesus for help to look at that with us. The dynamics of the ego will be our lesson for a while, for we must look first at this to see beyond it, since you have made it real. If we wouldn't have made it real, it wouldn't be there. In order to forgive it, we have to step back and look at it. Just look. There's nothing else to do, because then once we look with Jesus over time, we realize the illusory nature of it. But if we try to overlook it, we literally leave that massive pile of guilt on the floor, and it would always come back to us. What is healing but the removal of all that stands in the way of knowledge? And how else can one dispel illusions except by looking at them directly without protecting them? Be not afraid, therefore, for what you will be looking at is the source of fear. And you are beginning to learn that fear is not real. So I'm going to have a drink. I'm going to look at another one. Page 220. That is also a very, very striking paragraph, very clear that it is all about looking. The whole course is about looking at the ego and smiling at it. When we have overcome fear, not by hiding it, not by minimizing it, and not by denying its full import in any way, this is what you will really see. You cannot lay aside the obstacles to real vision without looking upon them, for to lay aside means to judge against. If you will look, the Holy Spirit will judge, and He will judge truly. So we judge a brother or a sister, we realize what we're doing, we step back and ask the Holy Spirit or Jesus for help to look with us, and that's it. We don't try to change what we see. We only, if you will look, the Holy Spirit will judge, and he will judge truly. It doesn't say if you will try to change what you see. Don't try to change what you see. Yet he cannot shine away what you keep hidden, for you have not offered it to him, and he cannot take it from you. Offering it to him means looking with him. It doesn't mean we give him the bad stuff and he takes it away. That is just a metaphor, right? The Holy Spirit doesn't take anything away because it's an illusion. He cannot take anything away. It is a process of us realizing that the guilt that is in our brother and the guilt that is in ourselves is an illusion. And in order for us to really get to that point experientially, that what we look at that isn't love is an illusion, we have to look at it. If we try to change it, we make it real. If we try to overlook it, we make it real. We just look at it. We merely look and wait and judge not. He cannot shine away what you keep hidden, for you have not offered it to him, and he cannot take it from you. We are therefore embarking on an organized, well-structured, and carefully planned program aimed at learning how to offer to the Holy Spirit everything you do not want. He knows what to do with it. You do not understand how to use what he knows. Yet you must look at it yourself in perfect willingness, for otherwise his knowledge remains useless to you. In perfect willingness, we have to look at our ego. Then it shifts a little bit. It's still the same looking, but this is not so much the guilt. It is indirectly the guilt that we're always looking at, but this is not directly related to guilt. This is more directly related to pain. It is in chapter 13, section 3, the fear of redemption, paragraph 7. Do not hide suffering from his sight. But bring it gladly to him. Lay before his eternal sanity all your hurt, and let him heal you. In order for us to lay everything that hurt us before him, lay before his eternal sanity all your hurt, we must look at it. We must see it first, right? We see everything that we think people did to us, right? And we looked at that with the Holy Spirit. And we will learn in time that nobody can do anything to us, and that any experience that we have is what we have chosen. But we can't let it go until we really look at it with open eyes, with Jesus next to us. Do not leave any spot of pain hidden from his light, and search your mind carefully for any thoughts you may fear to uncover. Some of the workbook is really aimed on this, to search our mind. A lot of the times in the workbook it says search your mind. Look for items that block the light, symbolically. There's plenty of those where in the second part of the lesson, in the actual practice period, a lot of times he says, look at your mind, look for those thoughts, that you want to keep hidden, that you want to keep from me. Another one, 286. That is in chapter 14, section 6. Therefore, keep no source of interference from his sight, for he will not attack your sentinels, but bring them to him, and let his gentleness teach you that in the light they are not fearful, and cannot serve to guard the dark doors behind which nothing at all is carefully concealed. So if we don't look at our ego, we will not realize that it's nothing. We can only realize the ego is nothing if we look at it. And the looking is a long process. 30, 40, 50, 60 years is nothing. Daily practice of looking at the ego with Jesus next to us. There are no hidden chambers in God's temple. Its gates are open wide to greet his son. One last one. That is 287, which is one page after this one. That is in section 7 of chapter 14. It says, the search for truth is but the honest searching out of everything that interferes with truth. Now that is a direct reference to the introduction, right? Because the introduction says, the course does not aim at teaching the meaning of love, for that is beyond what can be taught. It does aim, however, at removing the blocks to the awareness of love's presence, which is your natural inheritance. The search for truth is but the honest searching out of everything that interferes with truth. There we are back at the same theme. This theme goes through the whole course. Truth is, it can neither be lost, nor sought, nor found. It is there, wherever you are, being within you. Yet, it can be recognized or unrecognized, real or false to you. If you hide it, it becomes unreal to you because you hid it and surrounded it with fear. So the truth within us is surrounded by many, many layers of defenses. Our belief in individuality is one defense. Our belief in sin is the next layer. Our belief in guilt is the next layer. Projecting this guilt out onto the world and seeing it outside is the next layer. And the final layer is the fear of the attack of the outside world toward us. All those are defenses against the truth within us. And we can't just get to the truth. We have spent collectively billions of years to make this defense foolproof, not God-proof, as the Course says, but foolproof, right? We can't just look beyond it to the truth. We are too afraid. We theoretically could, but Jesus knows we're way too afraid to do that. So we start looking at little things. We look at things that annoy us. We look at things that are embarrassing, and then we go deeper and deeper into until the end when we look at the fact that we think we killed God. We think we abandoned and destroyed our home. That is the basis of why this world exists, because we think we killed God. But we don't look at that right away. We go through the lighter or the easier defenses first until we come to the darker and darker places. And in this long period of time of this process with the Course, what I said in the beginning, when we finally look at the foundation of the ego thought system, which is where the fear of God is buried, right past that is the truth and love. We have also looked at Jesus' thought system, because we've had a couple of experiences of his love and of love in general. We had some holy instants and some moments with other people that we felt joined with them. Those are those moments that keep us going, that we know love is real. Then we go back to the ego, and the ego says, no, fear is real. Love is not real. I give you love that is special love is real. But that's a different topic, obviously. But so at the end of the process, we have looked at both thought systems fully. We have looked at the ego thought system fully with Jesus and his thought system by our side. And once we have both of them in front of us, we can leave both of them behind and leap back into God's arms, those arms we have never left.